Good afternoon. My name is Lauren Williams, and I'm Adult and Community Services Manager here at the Columbia Public Library, which is part of the Daniel Boone Regional Library. If you're here in the room, we have our new program guides for May and June programs, so please pick one up if you haven't already. For those of you on Zoom, check out our website, the events tab. You can find out what's coming up. Welcome to today's Lunch and Learn, where we're excited to hear from Stevens College President Shannon Lundeen. Today's Lunch and Learn is co-hosted by the library and by the League of Women Voters of Columbia Boone County. We have people attending, like I said, both here in the room and on Zoom, so just a couple of Zoom housekeeping items. If you're on Zoom and at the end of the presentation you'd like to ask some questions, please use the chat feature. We ask that you use the drop-down menu and select that your chat can be seen by everyone so other attendees can see what's already been asked. And then when it's time for those in the friends room here to ask questions, I'll be walking around with this microphone so the folks on Zoom can be sure to hear the questions as well. We are recording this presentation, so it will be available on both the libraries and the libraries and the League's YouTube channels for future viewing. And now I'd like to welcome Sharon Schneeberger, excuse me, my tongue tied today, of League of Women Voters to introduce our speaker.
Dr. Shannon Lundeen became the 25th president of Stevens College on June 1st, 2025. After serving as Vice President of Programs and Operations at Higher Education Resource Services, while there, she advanced inclusive excellence and leadership initiatives for women in higher education. Thank you. She previously held leadership roles at the University of Pennsylvania, Case Western Reserve University, and Elon University. She led programs focusing on gender equity, interdisciplinary learning, and student engagement. President Lundeen earned her PhD and MA in philosophy from Stony Brook University and is recognized for her scholarship in feminist bioethics and inclusive education. To illustrate the qualities President Lundeen brings to Columbia and Stevens College, in her first commencement address at Stevens, she closed the graduation ceremony by reminding the 2026 class of their belonging. And I quote, this came from the Missourian, so I hope they got it right. If not, you can help us out. Stevens has spent nearly 2 centuries doing one thing exceptionally well, opening doors. Doors to rooms that for a long time, a lot of people were told they did not belong in. You are the inheritors of that work. Thank you.
Mic'd right. Can you hear me okay? Okay. Well, thank you for that great introduction, Sharon. And it really is quite a pleasure to be here. This is actually my first time. I pass the library every day on my way to work, and this is actually my first time coming here. I don't know why. My youngest child is 8 years old. I need to bring him here. So, but he goes to school at Stevens College in our children's school. So he gets to go to our library with a bunch of college students and other kids that are around his age. So I just want to start by saying that I care about this work really deeply. That's probably somewhat obvious. Otherwise, I would have not chosen Stevens or relocated my family here. But it's something I've really spent my career thinking about, which is the role of education in women's lives. I want to be honest with you about what I'm trying to do in the next 40-ish minutes before we have Q&A. I'm not going to give you a tour of Stevens College. You'd have to come there for that. We do have golf carts, so call us if you would like to arrange that. I'm not going to deliver a recruitment pitch. Many of you already went to Stevens and graduated from Stevens, so I'm not going to recruit you back. And I'm not going to pretend that I have all of the answers to the very real challenges that are facing higher education and women right now in this country. But I am going to share with you a body of evidence, an institutional story, and a set of convictions about why the work matters, why it matters today, and why a college like Stevens has something distinctive to contribute. And then I'm going to want to hear from you all. So
This is the path that we have today. First, we're going to talk about why education matters in the lives of women, not only what a degree returns in dollars, but what it returns in everything else, in health, in voice, and in choices. And second, I'm going to give you a data update on where women actually stand in higher education today. Some of what I will show you is encouraging. Some of it's going to feel sobering. And all of it, though, is going to be worth knowing. Third, I'm going to talk about why women's colleges still matter in 2026. It's a question that I get often, and one I think the data answer more clearly than most people realize. And fourth, and most importantly, I'm going to tell you what's happening at Stevens College right now. The programs that we're building, the pedagogy that we're practicing, and the direction that we're heading. And then I'm going to want your questions and ideas. Okay, so I want to start with a premise that frames everything else I'm going to say. Education is the most powerful instrument that we have for changing what is possible for an individual, for a community, and for a generation. That sentence is doing a lot of work. So let me unpack it briefly. The word that matters most there is possible. Education does not guarantee outcomes. It does not erase structural barriers. It does not by itself fix what is broken in any society. Education widens the frame through which what we see is possible. It expands the range of futures that a person can imagine for themselves and then provides knowledge, confidence, and capacity to step into those futures. For women especially, higher education has long been one of the most powerful levers of broadening that horizon of possibility, opening doors to greater agency, to voice, to social opportunity, and economic mobility in the world. That's the premise. And now let's take a look at the evidence. So I'm going to talk a little bit about why education matters in women's lives. Some of it will seem obvious. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about the role and the returns of higher education. If any of you listened to NPR on the way here, you may have heard a story at the top of the last hour that was all about basically why should anybody care about college anymore. I chose to turn it off after 30 minutes. I was like, I need to get in the right headspace for this talk. So we're still going to talk about some data, but it might be different, a little bit different than what you heard if you listened to that 11 o'clock show. So let's start with the economic case, because that's the case people argue about the most. And frankly, it's the one that I just want to dispense with first, so we can get to the more interesting questions. So a woman with a bachelor's degree earns over her lifetime approximately $790,000 more than a woman whose education stopped at high school. That exact figure will depend on which controls you apply. So things like racial identity, marital history, number of children that someone has had. Nonetheless, that is not a marginal difference, the $790,000. That's generational wealth. It's the ability to retire. It can make the difference in the ability to care for an aging parent without going into debt. Roughly 67% of women who start at a four-year college now finish within 6 years. And that completion rate has been climbing steadily for the past decade. The picture of higher education as a place where women begin but do not finish is increasingly out of date. Women have earned the majority of bachelor's degrees in this country every year since the early 1980s. They currently hold over 57% of bachelor's degrees, and they account for 61% of current graduate enrollment. Those are the headline numbers. They are very real. They're documented, and they tell us, of course, that by the metric of access alone, women have moved from the exception to the majority of American higher education in a single generation. That is really impressive. So just sit and think on that. We also know that access is not the same as outcome, and earnings are only part of the story. So let's talk a little bit about quality of life, because this is what lifetime earnings do not quite capture. Education changes how long a woman lives. College-educated women report better health outcomes, lower rates of chronic disease, and longer life expectancy on nearly every dimension that public health researchers measure. That gap has widened, not narrowed, over the last 20 years. Education changes how a woman participates in her community. So in 2024, the 2024 election, 77% of bachelor's degree holders voted, compared with just 53% of high school graduates. And college-educated women turned out 70%, the highest rate of any group in our country. That pattern holds for volunteering as well. College graduates are roughly 50% more likely to volunteer than those without a degree. Those differences hold across most demographic groups, though size of the effect will vary from one group to the next. So education changes the next generation before that generation is even born. A mother's educational attainment is among one of the strongest predictors social science has of her children's academic success. Not her income, but her education level. And finally, education changes the texture and the quality of a woman's daily life. It enlarges the set of choices she can make in her work, in her family, in her public life, and it gives her the confidence to make those choices. This is what I mean when I say that education is a lever of agency. It's not abstract. It shows up in whether a woman can leave a job that is not serving her, whether she can speak up at a meeting, whether she can imagine a life that her own mother could not have imagined. Okay, so let's look a little bit at where women stand in higher education. I'll give you a little bit of a data update on access, attainment, and then some of the gaps that still remain. So, and I want to give you a clear picture here because the headlines tend to land as either triumph or a crisis, and the truth is more interesting than either. So this chart tells the most important demographic story in American higher education over the last 50 years. In 1970, men outnumbered women on American college campuses by nearly 1 million students. By the late 1970s, women had pulled even with men. And by the 1980s, women began to pull ahead and they have never looked back. Today, women make up, as I mentioned earlier, 58% of US undergraduate degree earners. That's a gap of about 2.6 million students. At the graduate level, the gap is even larger. Women hold about 61% of the share of all post-baccalaureate enrollment. And this is sometimes framed as a story about how men are falling behind. And that framing, of course, has truth to it. Stagnating male enrollment in four-year colleges is a real phenomenon that's worth understanding. But it's also a story about women showing up, finishing, and going on for more. Both things are true. Here's where the story gets more complicated. Women earn the majority of bachelor's degrees overall, but that majority is not evenly distributed across fields. If you look at the bottom of this chart, you're going to see that in health professions, women earn 84% of bachelor's degrees. In education, they earn 79%. And in psychology, 78%. Now take your eyes to the top of the chart. Engineering, they earn just 24% of the degrees. And computer science, just 21%. The pattern is what social scientists call sex typing of fields. Care work, helping professions, the humanities, those all have a female majority. Technical fields, especially the ones tied to the highest paying and fastest growing sectors of the economy, still have a male majority of degree earners, in some cases by very large margins. So this matters for two reasons. First, it means that the lifetime earnings advantage of women who have obtained undergraduate degrees over their peers who are high school graduates is partially eroded, meaning that their advantage to earn more over the lifetime is partly eroded by the fields that women are concentrated in, because they're much lower paying. A bachelor's in elementary education and a bachelor's in computer science are both degrees, but they pay very differently across a career. Second, this tells us that the work of opening fields to women is not finished. Title IX is more than 50 years old, but we have not yet seen its full effect. Okay, there are three numbers that I want you to take with you from this talk. First, $1.8 trillion in outstanding student loan debt in this country. That's all genders. I see Marina shaking her head. She's probably the youngest one in the room. She's like, yes, I know this college debt thing real well. Here's what should be sobering and should shock you, that women hold 2/3 of that debt. Women borrow more, they take longer to pay it back, and women on average attend institutions where the borrowing is heaviest, including in the for-profit sector that expanded rapidly in the 2000s and the 2010s. So the promise of education and the cost of education are not falling on women and men equally. Second, 79 cents to the dollar. Can you believe we're still there? I remember when I was running a women's center and we had a bake sale, and it was a feminist bake sale. And a guy would come up to buy a cookie, and one of our students would break off a quarter of it and say, "I'm gonna take that back, thanks so much." So we have equal pay, you can get 3/4 of the cookie that you bought. So 79 cents on the dollar is what a woman earns on average after graduating with a bachelor's degree compared to her male peer with the same degree. Not in the 1970s, not in 1995, but today in 2026. And then the third number, 33% of US college and university presidents are women. That has grown in the last decade. So that's about 1 in 3 college presidents who are women. However, when you put it in the context of the fact that women earn the majority of every degree higher education awards, the people running the institutions still skew heavily male, particularly at the largest and most prestigious campuses. And I'm sure all of you remember just a few short years ago, watching the women that had to come before Congress and who were very promptly removed from or made to step down from holding the presidency. So I share all of these not to be discouraging. I share them because the work of education for women is not finished. The next chapter is not about getting women into college. They're already there. The next chapter is about what happens to them inside of our institutions and what happens to them afterwards. So now we're going to talk a little bit about why women's colleges still matter. So this is a question that I often get asked. If women are now the majority of college students everywhere, what is the point of a women's college? It's a fair question and it deserves a serious answer, so let me give you one. So here's the finding that I want you to hold on to. Graduates of women's colleges earn doctorates at roughly twice the rate of women who graduate from coeducational institutions. They're overrepresented in STEM doctorates. They're overrepresented on corporate boards relative to their numbers. And they're overrepresented in both the federal legislature and in federal judgeships. That's not a marketing claim, that's what the data show. So the question becomes why? What is it about a women's college that produces those outcomes? So if you look at the right side of the slide, there's 4 answers and none of them are really that mysterious. First, every leadership role on a women's college campus is held by a woman. Student leadership roles I'm talking about. Every editor of the student newspaper, every captain of every team, every student body president, every lab lead, and every research group. When a young woman spends 4 years watching other young women run things, she learns at a deep level that women can and do run things and ought to, even after they graduate. Second, faculty model what advanced expertise looks like in a woman's voice every day. Now, not all faculty at a women's college are women. However, 70% of today's women's college faculty members are women. More importantly, however, regardless of the faculty member's gender identity, women's colleges model what it looks like to listen and to value the voices, experiences, and perspectives of women because that's who they're teaching in their classroom. Third, the classroom dynamics that researchers have long documented in mixed gender courses, what's sometimes called the chilly climate effect or stereotype threat. They don't operate in the same way when men are not in the room. So the question of who speaks up, who gets called on, who's interrupted, is not a question that turns on the gender identity of the student in a women's college classroom. And fourth, the alumni networks are powerful. Many of you are alums in this room, and you know how often you have relied on that network for support, for pushing you, and also for making the kind of professional and personal networks and connections that can help make you feel like you can take the next step. So women's college graduates have built over generations professional networks that are designed explicitly to lift each other up and open doors into rooms where women have not historically been welcome. Those networks are not metaphors, they're real, they're working, and they're part of why our graduates land where they land. Okay, so this is the market context. This is a little bit of a note on scale because it does matter. There are only approximately 29 women's colleges left in the United States today. This is down from roughly 230 in 1960. We represent less than 1% of all four-year institutions in this country. So there are about 2,691 four-year or more institutions of higher education. We represent 1.08%. And yet, although only a small percentage of American women attend women's colleges, graduates of women's colleges make up more than 20% of the women serving in US Congress. That's a striking statistic because it tells you that this small set of institutions has, for more than a century, been a disproportionate engine of women's public leadership in America. So here's the point that I want to land. Women's colleges produce outsized results from a fraction of the footprint. They're not nostalgic institutions, they are high yield institutions. And in a moment when women have finally achieved enrollment majority across American higher education, but have not yet achieved earnings parity or leadership parity, the work of women's colleges arguably matters more now than it has in 50 years, not less. Okay. Now I'm going to take you into a closer look at what we are doing at Stevens today, because of course, to still be around since 1833, we've had to be nimble, we've had to evolve, and we've had to make sure that we are keeping a pulse on what our students need, what industry leaders need, what community members need of their graduates. So I'm going to give you a quick orientation for those of you who may not know Stevens by reputation, or who may know us by reputation, but not by the details. So we were founded in 1833. We're the second oldest still operating women's college in the country. Anybody take a guess at the oldest that's still operating?
Vassar. Wellesley.
Vassar's co-ed now.
Oh,
No,
Wellesley.
no,
Smith.
no, not one of the original seven sisters. Salem College in Winston-Salem, North Carolina. They also still have their all-girls academy, which is 9th through 12th grade, and then they have their college still. So they're still in operation, and they were founded in the late 1700s. Don't quote me on the year, I can't remember it, but late 1700s.
Didn't know, but
So,
had to begin.
yeah, So we're the second oldest still operating women's college in the country. We were also the first institution of higher education founded in Columbia, Missouri. We predate the University of Missouri. That's a point of institutional pride for us, and it's a reminder of how long this work has been going on in the middle of the country. Despite its intentionally small size, Stevens College offers nearly 50 undergraduate and graduate academic programs spanning the health sciences, performing arts, creative arts, business, education, and professional studies. Our student faculty ratio is 7-1. That's probably lower than what some of you who attended back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, right? That's probably, you had more students in your classrooms than we have right now. But we're proud of that ratio because it means something. It means that our students are known by name, not by number. They're known by their aspirations and by struggle. And they are known by the people whose job it is to help them be successful both inside and outside of the classroom. Each of our degree programs produces the kind of specialized career-ready graduates that, in my experience, surprises people who have not encountered our students before. So let's take a peek at experiential learning in action. I'm going to give you 3 snapshots, but you can find more at our Stevens College YouTube channels if you're curious about how Stevens has evolved to meet the needs of our students and the demands of the 21st century workplace. Let's see if this will work.
At Stevens, entrepreneurship doesn't start with theory, it starts with making. Across business, fashion, and communication design, students don't just imagine products, they design, create, and launch them. This is cross-disciplinary innovation at its finest. In our creative hub, ideas become tangible. Whether students are prototyping in a cricket lab, shooting in the photography studio, or producing in our screen printing shop, they have professional tools to build a brand from scratch. But we go beyond the build. Students bring those products to market through Creative Inc., our student-run agency where they get experience working with real-world clients on projects that demand real-world results. Their work lives and sells in the real world at Susie's, our campus store that is managed and curated by students, as well as in pop-up stores and digital storefronts. By graduation, our students aren't just job ready, they're venture ready. This is entrepreneurship, Stephen style.
And that amazing young woman in the back there, Marina Diaz, is responsible for these videos. She did an amazing job putting some of these videos together that can give people just a quick glimpse of what life at Stevens for a Stevens student is like these days. So thank you, Marina. So now I'm going to give you a peek at our conservatory for the performing arts at Stevens. So many of you who are graduates of Stevens, you remember there being a performing arts department, right? And a set of programs that offer degrees. In 2022, we established the conservatory as a separate unit from the Women's College. So it still sits under Stevens College, but it is totally gender inclusive. So it's a gender inclusive, competitive, and intensive conservatory for the performing arts. And it offers a number of accelerated 3-year Bachelor's of Fine Arts degrees, as well as a BA in filmmaking and an MFA, a Master of Fine Arts in TV and Screenwriting. So I'll give you a little peek into the conservatory.
At Stevens, the arts aren't an add-on, they're a cornerstone. Our Conservatory for the Performing Arts welcomes artists of every gender identity and nurtures talent in a diverse, inclusive environment where every voice matters. Students train with working professionals from Broadway, film, and television in programs designed to launch creative careers. They choose BFA pathways in acting, musical theater, filmmaking, theatrical costume design, tech, and stage management, or interdisciplinary theater studies, or continue their training in our MFA in screenwriting. From stage to screen, students gain hands-on experience every step of the way, including immersive work with industry professionals at our summer stock theater in Okoboji, Iowa. They graduate with professional credits, industry connections, and the confidence to step into creative careers. This is the future of performing arts at Stevens.
And finally, we're changing the field of animal behavior and centering our pets and non-human animal companions in our academic pursuits, in our research, and in sport, always asking, what does it look like to center the wellness, the well-being, and the health and welfare of any animal that we are working with? So I'll give you, this is the last video I'll show you, and then you can go find more if you'd like.
At Stevens College, animal care isn't just a program, it's a calling. We're expanding our historic equestrian tradition into a future-focused model of animal care, one that centers wellness, behavior, science, and connection. From our evolving equestrian program with horse-centered care to our new animal behavior program, students learn across disciplines. They train and study in upgraded indoor and outdoor arenas and work alongside partners like Cooler Veterinary Services and the American Mustang Project. Through collaborations with Retrieving Freedom and Second Chance, students gain hands-on experiences with animals of all kinds on a campus proud to be the pet-friendliest in the country. Here, students don't just study animals, they advocate for them, care for them, and build careers rooted in compassion and expertise. This is animal care, reimagined for the future.
Okay, and now it's not a video about this, I'm gonna talk through the block schedule because for those of you who have not kept up with Stevens in the last couple of years, this is something new that we've done. We just finished our second academic year utilizing the block schedule. So this is really not just, you know, an innovative program and telling you about how the program and the content is adapted to meet industry demands and student needs today. This is more about a pedagogical innovation. So the majority of Stevens operates on a block schedule. All but the conservatory and nursing students take one course at a time, not 4, not 5 or 7 at a time, just one. So, and this is laid out to kind of demonstrate that there are 4 blocks in each semester. So you're still taking the traditional course load of about 8 3-hour credit courses per academic year, but it's spread out and you can focus on one at a time. Each block runs roughly 3.5 weeks, and students spend that particular time fully immersed in a single subject. They might be in studio practice for 4 hours a day. That might be in clinical placement. They might be working on a single sustained research question with their faculty member. They might be sewing right in the fashion lab. Then the block ends and the next one begins. They have a 4.5-day break in between. And our conservatory and nursing students who are not on the same academic block schedule, they maintain the same block breaks. So socially speaking, they still have the same kind of time off from classes as the students in the rest of the women's college. So there are 3 things that this model gives our students that a traditional semester does not. First, it's depth, the kind of immersion that's functionally impossible if you're juggling, 3 to 5 classes, simultaneous syllabi, 5 sets of due dates, and different rhythms of attention that are required in a typical semester. Block scheduling lets a student go deep in a way that mirrors how serious intellectual and professional work actually happens in the world. Moreover, the block schedule makes study away opportunities more accessible and equitable. So national study abroad data show that most students now participate in short-term international programs rather than traditional semester-long experiences. For students that are balancing jobs, athletics, rehearsals, caregiving responsibilities, or other kinds of internships and placements, a short immersive block is often financially and logistically possible in ways that a full semester abroad or a full semester away is not. So the result is broader participation by students who have historically been less likely to access study away opportunities. Second, the block schedule creates predictable, manageable routines that are especially valuable for students who are balancing work, caregiving, and other responsibilities outside of class. One of the greatest barriers to persistence for today's students in terms of their persistence in a degree program is not intellectual ability, it is schedule complexity. So students who work, who parent children, who participate in sports, or who manage significant off-campus responsibilities, they often struggle with constantly shifting daily schedules. And if they don't have consistency from day to day, then they can't offer consistency to a job site, for example. So a block model offers unusual consistency and predictability, and students know that they know when class meets. So our blocks are typically run from 9 to 11:30, 11:45, 9 a.m. to 11:30, 11:45. They all have lunch together in our dining hall, and then they can go on to do other things. So whether it is an extension of learning, there's an opportunity to do something off-site in the afternoon, or it's a practice that they have to attend to, they're able to do that and they know what their schedule is going to be ahead of time. So that consistency we know reduces logistical stress, but also helps students remain enrolled and engaged. So for student athletes, performers, and all of our students in hands-on programming, that model also aligns more naturally with immersive learning experiences. And rather than forcing students to fragment their attention across multiple courses every day, the block schedule really allows them to integrate academic work more coherently into the realities of our students' lives. And then finally, it enhances learning retention and engagement. So research emerging from the pandemic consistently saw that students experienced increased anxiety, fragmented attention, executive functioning challenges, and difficulty sustaining focus across multiple competing demands. So a block schedule addresses that by allowing students to immerse themselves in one course at a time. It reduces some of that anxiety and allows them to just have a deep focus. Research on cognitive load and deep learning suggests that this kind of concentrated engagement improves retention, information retention, that is, participation, and academic confidence, particularly for students rebuilding academic momentum after educational disruption. And we're still in that tail end of COVID. So we're still seeing students that are arriving in college generally, not just at Stevens, underprepared and hyper anxious about what awaits them in college. So in practical terms, this block schedule really creates space for students to not just complete coursework, but to fully inhabit that learning process. It's a deliberate pedagogical commitment that Stevens made before my time, but made the transition for that shaped this kind of institution for years, meaning about ways, thinking outside of the box about how can we help our students learn and retain information and engage them in ways that are going to be critical for them by the time they graduate and go out into the workforce. Okay. So how we teach our pedagogical commitments. These are the things that shape every classroom at Stevens. So first, we're experiential by default. So internships, performances, clinicals, studio practice, field research, all of those things are not optional add-ons. They're required for our students, depending on what track of study they're in. And that's how our courses are built. So our students do the work of the field, in the field, while they're still students. And that's important for the job market when they graduate. Second, we value mentorship over lecturing. So that 7-to-1 ratio that I mentioned earlier, of students to faculty, it is a structural commitment. So our students are known by name, and faculty advising is really a continuous relationship with those students. It's not an annual checkpoint, right? Students who graduate from Stevens are leaving there with 3 or 4 mentors, whether they're faculty or staff, who are willing to write them recommendations for the rest of their lives. And then third, this is going to be more aspirational than it is current. So we are committed to making sure that career integration is not something that happens in their junior and senior year, but that it starts from day one in their first year on campus. That reflects more, like I said, it reflects more of an aspiration and a commitment than a reality at the moment, but every program at Stevens will embed professional preparation, resumes, networks, how to professionally network, portfolios, mock interview practice, alongside its disciplinary content from the very first year a student is on our campus. We don't really want to bolt career services on as an add-on or something that happens at the end of their undergraduate career, because our current landscape really demands that we integrate it throughout the curriculum. And then fourth, we are focused on whole person education, mental wellness resources, health promotion programming, a pet-friendly residential model, all of which helps our students be seen and supported as full human beings that exist in relationship with other living creatures. So those are the small structural choices that added together communicate to a student that the institution sees them as a whole person and not just as someone who's paying tuition, right? So it values the relationship over the transaction. Okay, so all this brings me to where we are right now as an institution. So following 16 years of consistent presidential leadership, I'm sure many of you spent time with Diane Lynch. Stevens entered a new chapter in June 2025. It wasn't just my leadership, but we have really, there's been a whole set of new leaders that have joined the senior leadership team at Stevens, which has been wonderful. So together we've really focused on clarifying institutional priorities, strengthening our operations, and positioning Stevens for long-term sustainability and growth while remaining still deeply grounded in our mission. So that work is already taking shape in a lot of visible ways. We're investing strategically in programs, academic programs where student demand and workforce need intersect with the distinctive strengths of Stevens, and that includes health sciences, performing and creative arts, equestrian studies, business and leadership, and then emerging areas that are connected to digital and creative media. At the same time, we're continuing to strengthen immersive, hands-on educational experiences that have long defined our institution. And we're making meaningful investments in the student experience and in the physical campus itself. So that includes improvements to residence halls, academic and performance spaces, technology infrastructure, and student-centered facilities that shape daily life on a residential college campus. Those are not simply cosmetic projects, although we could benefit from a facelift of some of our buildings for sure, but they are investments in whether students feel supported, connected, and importantly, safe, and therefore able to thrive at Stevens. We're continuing Stevens' longstanding commitment to expanding access to higher education. So we are paying very close attention to first-generation students, to our transfer students, to adult learners, and to students who are balancing family, work, and school. So in a moment of intentional forward movement for Stevens, any change that we make is not for the sake of change, but it is for the very thoughtful evolution rooted in 2 centuries of educating students for lives of leadership, purpose, and professional success. And this is, don't worry, I'm almost done so we can get to you and your questions. This is where we are heading. These are our strategic priorities for the next, I'm saying 5 years so that we have a longer roadmap, but truthfully, we're trying to get to these within 3 years. So first, we want to reaffirm and clarify our mission. We're going to continue to strengthen Stevens' identity as a women's college while also clearly articulating the full breadth of the Stevens educational ecosystem, which includes more than just women. So at a moment when many students are searching for belonging and mentorship and confidence and leadership development, our women's college model is not an outdated niche. It's powerful, increasingly relevant educational approach. So we want to speak about that clearly, confidently, and unapologetically, and we want to make sure that all of our students who are graduating conservatory understand why it's important that they were born out of a traditional women's college and how that shapes the way that they're taught and how they see things differently on the stage, off the stage, in the script, etc., behind the camera. Second, we're going to invest in programs where we are uniquely positioned to lead. We don't want to be in competition with somebody that does something better than us. It's not worth it, right? So we want to make sure that we are really reviewing all of our academic offerings, our academic portfolio, from continuing education to graduate and professional programs. And we want to make sure that we're going to continue to grow programs that have strong student outcomes, meaningful workforce demand, and deep alignment with the strengths of our institution. So we know that we're strong in health sciences, performing creative arts, equestrian studies, leadership, workforce development, and emerging areas in digital and creative industries. But we want to make sure that we have the resources to continue to be able to deliver in those. So we want to be able to grow certain programs and sunset others that no longer meet the needs of our community or of our students. Third, we want to deepen experiential learning and industry connection. So we've always been strongest when learning is connected directly to practice, not something that where you learn content in a classroom and then a couple months later you're asked to apply it somewhere. So over the next 5 years, we're going to continue building those intentional partnerships with the community across healthcare, the creative economies, business and entrepreneurship, education, and the different equine industries to expand the number of internships that are available for our students, clinical placements, production opportunities, mentorship networks, and career pipelines. We want students that are graduating not only with degrees, but with experience, professional confidence, and meaningful networks ready to make an impact wherever they go next. Fourth, we want to strengthen the student experience and the culture of community that defines Stevens. So relationships we know matter at a place like Stevens, where we're small. Students succeed because they are known here. We're going to continue investing in the spaces, the people, and the systems that create a very strong sense of connection and belonging. So that includes supporting faculty, staff, strengthening residential life, expanding leadership development opportunities for both our students as well as our employees, and deepening alumni engagement across generations. And then finally, we want to position Stevens for long-term sustainability and impact. So the future of higher ed, we know, is going to belong to institutions that are clear about who they are, very disciplined about their priorities, and that are willing to evolve while staying grounded in their mission. So our work over the next 5 years is not so much going to be about becoming a different institution. It's going to be about becoming a stronger, more focused, more sustainable version of Stevens. So these are the through lines that I want you to take with you. One, education remains one of the most powerful ways a woman expands the boundaries of what she believes is possible for her life. Not only economically, though the data on earnings and mobility are clear, but intellectually, professionally, socially, civically. Education enlarges voice, confidence, agency, and the ability to move through the world with choice rather than limitation. That's why institutions like Stevens matter. Second, the challenge facing higher ed has changed. The question is no longer simply whether a woman can access college. Women now earn the majority of both bachelor's and graduate degrees in the US. So the deeper question is whether institutions are preparing students not only to compete and complete degrees, but to lead meaningful lives, to navigate complexity, to build careers, to exercise courage, to sustain communities, and see themselves as worthy of influence and leadership long after graduation. And finally, we think, I'm speaking for the royal we at Stevens, think that we are uniquely positioned for this moment. Nearly 2 centuries ago, the institution was founded on the radical belief that women deserve serious intellectual formation, ambitious futures, and lives of consequence and impact. That mission still animates our campus today. The block schedule, the immersive learning model, the experiential learning in studios, clinics, rehearsal spaces, barns, laboratories, internships, and the spaces where we give students opportunities to lead. That's where we show up. The fact that students here are known so closely that they can be challenged, supported, and transformed. We've never really been about only helping a student earn a credential. It's always been about helping students become larger and better versions of themselves. Okay. So, at a time when we know so much public discourse feels really polarized and transactional, local organizations we know, like the League of Women Voters, matter at normalcy because they keep alive that the idea that civic life is something that we build together and not on Facebook. Although sometimes we do, but especially during COVID and other global health pandemics, but it's something that we have to continue doing together. So in Columbia, I know that we have an opportunity here, and I would really argue a responsibility to make sure that we can model what thoughtful, informed, community-centered engagement can look like. And so my hope is that Stevens and the League can continue to deepen that partnership, creating more opportunities for students to step into civic leadership, to practice dialogue across difference, which we know is getting so hard because they will hide behind phones and anonymous, right, texts and chats and whatever. We need them to be able to practice dialogue across difference and to understand that democracy is not abstract. It's local, it's relational, and it depends on all of us. So we know that the future of our democracy will not depend on only who holds office, but on who believes that they belong in the conversation in the first place. So thank you for your leadership at the League, your persistent belief in the power of engaged citizens. I'm really eager to hear your ideas about how we can partner and how we can help support the next generation of voters and how we can continue to engage thoughtfully and courageously in public life. So I've given you a bunch for exactly 43 minutes. And I'm really eager to hear what you're thinking, so I'm going to turn it over to you. Where would you like to start?
Yeah. We have a Zoom question.
Yes.
What support would you like to see from the city of Columbia for Stevens to thrive for another 50 years?
Well, I can say that one of the things that I get asked when I'm not at Stevens and I'm not at Columbia is, first of all, if they haven't heard of Stevens, they want to know about Stevens. And they say, well, what's the most surprising thing since you started your first presidency? And I say, well, it's not that a lot of people didn't know about Stevens. It's that I did not understand how strongly the community believes in and supports Stevens. I didn't expect that. I expected yay, raw, Mizzou, right, big SEC school right down the street. I did not expect that people would rally around an institution like Stevens. And we had a couple of crises this past academic year that helped, unfortunately, helped illustrate that really clearly for me. So I feel like we have wonderful support in the community. I have on my phone, I could call the fire chief, I could call the police chief, I can text the CEO of Boone Hospital, there's things that I can do in a community like this that I couldn't expect to do or hope to do in another community. So I feel like we already have excellent support from the community. So I think that the most valuable thing would be to keep those lines of communication open. And I think that we need to do a better job both at Stevens as well as in the different areas around both Columbia and Boone County in onboarding new leaders to those relationships. So I got that out of crisis, not because it was part of my onboarding. And I'm not saying that any individual was responsible for that, but if we have a culture of onboarding new leaders to this community that includes understanding who are the leaders in our public schools and our institutions of higher learning, as well as in our county and our city, elected officials and otherwise, I think that would go a long way to continue to strengthen those relationships, because we can be both and, meaning you can support smaller colleges like Columbia College and Stevens College and still go right down the street to a football game in Mizzou's stadium, right? You can be a supporter of both. So I would like to see that continue to strengthen.
It strikes me that the block schedule is kind of ideal for some part-time faculty that may not otherwise be tapped. What's the percentage of full-time versus part-time in the faculty, and is that changing?
Yes, that's a great question. I don't have the numbers off the top of my head. I can get them for you for sure, because we've actually just been looking quite closely at that. I just can't come up with the percentages, but I know that there's a lot of things that have changed at Stevens. So, and this is true in the higher ed landscape period. We have fewer tenured and tenure track faculty anywhere in all of our four-year institutions, period. That seems to be on the decline. And the same is true at Stevens. We certainly have far more renewable contracts for our faculty members than we have tenure track or tenured faculty members. So by last count, I believe that we have 29 full-time faculty who are on annual contracts that get renewed each year. And we have five active, because we have two others who have achieved tenure but now are administrators, so they don't quite count in our count. So, but I think only five tenured faculty members or tenure track faculty members. So that helps kind of paint that picture. And we do have several adjuncts. We have adjuncts that are kind of on repeat. We use them all the time and they love working with us and our students, but they only teach one course at a time. We also have some adjuncts who will teach online. And so that's another thing I didn't mention about the block schedule, but we have the opportunity for students. You could be taking 4 courses a semester, but one of those might be an online asynchronous semester-long course. It could be with our faculty, or it could also be in one of our larger online course consortia that we participate in. You could then take one block off, right? So you could do something different. You could go have an internship experience. You could go work for that block. That's 3.5 weeks that you could have on your own, because you could participate in 3 traditional blocks and then 1 online semester length course. So there's a lot of variety in there. And I think sometimes people would argue the opposite about opening up more doors for part-time faculty, because I've heard it go both ways. That yes, especially for retired faculty, that's helpful because they can say, I'm going to do this for 3 retired faculty who want to come do part-time, teach 1 or 2 blocks out of any given year, because they can say, I can give 3.5 weeks of my time to this, but I'm not giving up an entire semester. I'm not giving up 16 weeks. Others have said, if you're not targeting, folks who have already retired, it's going to be really difficult for somebody to drop everything and do every day, because it's Monday through Friday, every day, 9 to 12. So I think it goes both ways.
Another question from Zoom. What are your thoughts regarding the discussion and efforts by government, both federal and state, about reducing financial support for academic areas they consider so-called lower wage careers? Your stats showed how high the percentage is that women go to education, caregiving, and other careers that may pay less, which she identifies as traditional female careers.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, feminized careers also, right? So, my reaction, I've looked at this in 2 different ways. So one is this is the beating drum of, show us the relevance and the promise of higher education, show us that it's worth what it costs. And I do think that higher ed institutions have a responsibility to be able to translate what they're doing in those terms. But not everything that you graduate with when you graduate with a degree can be quantified in dollars and cents. It just can't be. So earnings cannot be the whole conversation. So I think we have to talk about, what do you earn in terms of money? So that, because that's talking about economic mobility and what are your future career potential for future career paths, steps up, et cetera, ongoing graduate or professional work after you graduate with a bachelor's degree. But I also think that we have to talk about what an undergraduate degree, especially at a residential college, what that can do for an individual. And I think I've heard so many Stevens alums already say this, right? That the kind of confidence that it engenders in them allows them to walk into a room. They could walk into a space where they don't know what's going on and still feel like they not only belong there, but that they can speak up and ask a question, and that they have something to both learn and contribute in that space. And you can't measure that in dollars and cents. You just can't do it. Now, if somebody would prefer, because of whatever the demands are on their schedule, to be able to to earn their degree fully online, then a place like Stevens is not going to be the place for that student. We want to be able to take students who, whether they are a traditional age student, so meaning they're coming in right after high school around 18 years of age, or they're coming in a little later, we want to be able to shape the development of the whole person. And again, you cannot quantify that in dollars and cents, right? So helping them understand things like, how do you talk across differences? How do you stay in difficult conversations and keep pushing because you want to learn more? You can't quantify that. And so I think that we still have to be able to look at how our education, the education that we're providing at any institution, Stevens or elsewhere, correlates with preparation for industry demands, local, regional economic demands that we have in our communities. But I don't think that can be the full story. As soon as we do that, then we're really reducing what education provides. And we're even shortchanging what K through 12 education is for, because that's also about developing the whole student. And Lord knows if anybody is the parent of a 16-year-old, they are not about to be fully formed when they graduate 2 years later from high school. So there's a reason why we have such a long adolescence as humans, and we are not done developing at age 18. We need all the help we can get. That said, rising costs of higher education they're very real. Tuition has not kept up with inflation, but also the cost of providing that education just keeps going up. And so we have to figure out a way to balance the burden on students while also still maintaining our facilities, our academic programs, not shortchanging our faculty and staff, et cetera. So it's complicated. So I think that we just have to complicate the conversation. When we get asked a question that's all about, degrees and earnings after you graduate, we have to say, that's not a fair conversation to have, but that's the only thing we're going to talk about.
I have a number of questions, but I hope have short answers.
Okay.
What about the student who comes in and doesn't know what they want to do? They're an undecided student. How are these blocks going to work so that they can figure out what they want to do?
Yeah, so those are my favorite students. Just speaking across the board, my favorite students are the ones who say, I don't know, I might want to go into fashion, or I might want to go into business administration, or a combination of both. And so because we are so small, we have the ability for our incoming first year students to be able to work with the registrar really closely in determining their schedule for the fall semester. So there are some general education requirements that they'll need to take. So that will determine some of the blocks that they will take, but then their interests will determine the others. And so they don't have to come in saying, I know I want to major in fill in the blank. If they say that they're undecided, then there's going to be another conversation about, well, what are some of the things that you think you might be interested in? Let's try to get you into some of those classes so you get a taste of those in your first semester. So
General education. I didn't hear anything about history and English and beginning math. Are those still being taught?
So they are still being taught. Yes, we still have a general education curriculum. It's 36 hours in the minimum in the women's college, and it's 30 hours in the conservatory. And yes, it covers you have the foundation of liberal arts and sciences. We don't have departments anymore of history, of philosophy, of religion. And you're talking to, I don't know if you heard when Sharon introduced me, I have a PhD in philosophy. So I get sad about that. However, nobody hires a philosopher right out of undergrad anyways to philosophize. So nobody's doing that. We probably should be. The world might be a different place, but nobody's doing that. So I did not walk right into a career either in philosophy or women's studies, which was my double major in undergrad. But what it did prepare me for, and what we can still offer our students, is a very interdisciplinary approach to developing critical thinking and to understanding both the history of our world, the history of American politics, et cetera. And so that's the kind of education that we're still providing at Stevens. You just won't see those same departments that when we were bigger.
Are you going to have classes for adults who just want to take 1 or 2 classes? I took 1 or 2 classes at Stevens, but it sounds like if I want to take one now, I have to be prepared to take it 3 weeks all day.
Yeah, so we are looking at that. It's a question that we've been asking about, how can the block schedule meet the needs of adult learners? Because that makes it really difficult to be able to do that. So one of the things that we have talked about, but we've not dug into the data to explore, is whether or not we can offer evening classes. It might just be there might be 1 class or 2 classes a semester that could be offered at that. And our traditional students could still take those classes. That would be a traditional semester length. But we have not even approached that with, it's been a question that's been raised, but we have not yet approached that with faculty. So we need to bring that to them first. But you were right that the block schedule does present some challenges to what we used to have, which was the Stevens Without Walls, which is where we really were targeting adult learners, especially women who were coming back to finish their degree, maybe after either, parenting responsibilities had lessened, or they wanted to have a career shift. So I'd like to be able to serve those students again.
I wanted to thank you so much for your interest in partnering with the League of Women Voters. That's very exciting. And I wonder if you have any thoughts on how we can explore that. We do have a lot of existing volunteer opportunities. We're always seeking help in a lot of ways. Can you think of any next steps for that to help make that happen?
So we have a new vice president for student success and engagement. She just started May 4th. So she is somebody that I would make sure that all of us were in conversation over the summer in advance of our first years arriving on campus. And possibly with some of our returning students who are already positioned to be leaders on campus and who would be very interested in trying to get more involved civically speaking. We also have a faculty member who is she's in our business program, but she's always trying to create more opportunities for our students to see what does civic engagement look like across all different spectrums of, age in Columbia. So she would be very eager to also build some kind of coursework around participation in the league. So I think there's lots of opportunities there. I would say we probably need to get 4 or 5 of us in a room together to talk about what would be possible.
We loved working with Creative Inc.
Oh, yeah. Oh, good.
They do
Yeah.
social media stuff.
That is excellent. And that's another way. I mean, those students who are creative and design students who might not otherwise be necessarily politically active and engaged, that could be a real good foray into having those discussions.
And we kept saying, now, remember, go vote.
Uh-huh.
I think we made a difference.
Good.
Well, we are at the end of our hour. I want to please thank you for listening. Thanks for thank you so much for the opportunity.
Are they good? Message says too. Women voters and other.
Yeah.
Sign.